BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Alright, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. And first I would like to give a shout out to Shaper Art, who has shared some new images with me. As some of you know, I released a new book this year called Down the Dark Lane, 3 Thrillers from the Motel. It is fictional, but the final story is a sequel to Killer on a White Horse, which have both been inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, meaning the final story in Down the Dark Lane and the novel that came out last year. And Shaper Art shares some new images about both of the books, so all of that is appreciated. Now, another great reminder is that on the weekends there is a regular series that has been coming out talking about the Moraga letters. I've been corresponding with someone who uses the YouTube name Sphere the Cube, also known as Sphery, and he is in the possession of several documents which may have been written by the Zodiac Killer. And not only that, Sphery has proposed a new suspect named Robert Volvins. And if you'd like to hear more about that, I would invite you to tune into the weekend episodes. Thank you to everyone who listened to the 2 Halloween episodes for that, discussing the Zodiac Killer's Halloween card, which was mailed on October 27th of 1970. And in the majority of these Zodiac Killer news reports, I talk about Zodiac Killer suspects, or maybe somebody has a theory about how the case was intended to have been solved, or they have just observations that they've made. Maybe it's a solution to the cipher, or like last week's Moraga Letters episode, talking about the artwork on the Halloween card. Does it have a deeper meaning? But this Zodiac Killer news report is going to be a little bit different. Before I say any more, I would like to remind you guys that the show is available for free downloads at LaunchPad 1, and if you'd like to support any of these efforts, you can go over to BuyMeACoffee.com. There's a link to that in the description box. BuyMeACoffee.com allows you to make a donation or a contribution to help support Black Box Online Radio, and anybody who makes a donation or contribution will get a shout-out on Zodiac Mondays. But I said this episode was going to be different. I would like to read a comment that was left by Neil Arnold on last week's Zodiac Killer news report, and it says, "Somebody needs to write a book on all these cranks who come up with all these weak suspects. Imagine if the Zodiac Killer mystery were solved. I wonder if all these sleuths would feel guilty dragging innocent people's names through the mud. The psychology of the accusers is what interests me. But when someone challenges these accusers, they slam you down as a spammer. It's a disturbing trend. Great show as always, Ned." Well, thank you so much, Neil. And this is what I would like to begin with, because I definitely have thought a lot about this particular subject. I just haven't shared that with you guys because it's not immediately relevant to the question of who was the Zodiac Killer, or what is the meaning of the Z13 cipher, like what's the hidden message in that. It's more about the researchers themselves. But okay, you want to talk about the personality and the behaviors of people who are promoting Zodiac Killer books, for-profit materials, as well as just individuals who are online sharing this stuff for free. Okay, let's look at some behavioral patterns that I've observed over the years. The first is, there are people who do not accept any type of criticism at all. And if you challenge them on their particular theory, they will get very angry, they'll get very defensive, they will try to blame you for being some type of unjust person, and they'll view that just a simple challenge question, hey, you said this, but you also said that, therefore how could this be true? They will say that you are attacking them and you are not being fair and honest, they know the truth and you're ignoring it. And I think that these people are in mostly two different categories. The first is that some of them genuinely have mental illnesses and they aren't completely aware of reality. And I mean, I don't even want to share too much because I think it's going to come across in an insensitive way. Some people are dealing with schizophrenia and they can't differentiate between the abstractions in their own mind and the external world. But then there are people who are not mentally ill. I mean, I repeat, not mentally ill. Or at the very least, they're not schizophrenics, but they just accept absolutely no criticism. They just explode when it comes to a particular challenge question. Well, I don't think that your solution to the cipher is correct because you aren't addressing all of the symbols that are used in it. Someone might just point out something that is very basic and that might be a genuine piece of criticism, yet they still get extremely angry and defensive. And those people are acting as if they get to tell the story. If they get to tell the story, then it's true. And I think that that is more of a childish behavioral characteristic as opposed to a mental illness. But they will talk and talk and talk about all the reasons why their Zodiac killer suspect is the real Zodiac. I know the truth about the Zodiac killer, and you're like, all right, let's hear it. Well, I'm going to tell you some of it, and then you have to wait for the rest. And then they tell you some of it, and you're like, well, wait a second, I don't think that's true because of this, this, and this. And then they blame you for it. And I'm sure you've seen them on discussion boards. I'm sure you've seen them in some of the Zodiac killer groups. I'm sure you've seen them in the comments section on YouTube. And maybe some of them are even running YouTube channels themselves, but they think if they get to tell the story, then it's real. And those people are doing something that I really want to explore in the future, maybe on AstroPsy 400, or even if I could write a whole book on this subject. Some people conflate belief systems with entertainment. And by that same token, some people conflate true crime theories with entertainment, where they're just saying this stuff because they're having fun with it. And they don't know that. They think they're actually trying to solve a mystery, but they're just coming up with this wild theory involving all of these participants, and they're not even 100% aware that they're doing this, but it's just a game to them. And that's why I think that there's enough material to write an entire book on that particular subject about how people are doing things and they aren't completely aware of them. Alright, so that's one thing. The people who accept no criticism. The second one is, well, first I'll give a shout out to David Oranchak, who made this original observation. Yes, David Oranchak, who was responsible for solving the 340 cipher along with Jarl Van Eyck and Sam Blake. David Oranchak wrote this out about a particular Zodiac researcher, but it could apply to many people. When he is faced with contradictory evidence, he incorporates it into his own theory, and it is a self-delusion. So the first one, to the people who accept no criticism, the second one would be the self-delusional. And I think that a good way to get this would be using some examples. Let's say somebody proposes a Zodiac killer suspect, and then they reveal that suspect's handwriting, and you look at the handwriting sample and you're like, well, I don't think that handwriting looks like the Zodiac killer's. And then the person says, well, that's because he was ambidextrous and he could write with his left hand and his right hand. It happens all the time, whether it's Arthur Lee Allen or William Joseph Grant, or they're even saying this about Gary Francis Post right now, that he was ambidextrous. It's just a cop-out. I've always thought that because, again, they're trying to account for something about how there's part of their theory that doesn't completely work. So they need an explanation. But that's exactly what Oranchak was talking about. They're just adding in an additional statement. They're taking the contradictory evidence and incorporating it into their theory. Why doesn't his handwriting look like the Zodiac letters? Oh, well, maybe he was writing with his other hand. And another good example of this would be, say, the 340 cipher was solved, right? Because we're talking about Orange Shack. And there are all these people out there who have proposed solutions to the 340 cipher. They're saying that, okay, this is what the Zodiac was trying to do. I mean, lots of people will come to mind. Maybe you're thinking about Kelly Marshall, for instance, or there was that other guy who was selling a book that is all about a solution to the 340 cipher. I even proposed a solution to the 340 cipher, which you can hear on Black Box Online Radio, as well as please like, subscribe, go through some of the older episodes. More than 1,000 episodes of Black Box Online Radio are now available to you guys for free. And then the solution comes out from Orange Shack, Blake, and Van Eyck, and the FBI signs off on that, and they say, okay, this is the solution to the 340 cipher. Then what that person says is, well, the cipher could have a hidden meaning. There could be a secret message in the cipher. Yeah, his solution's correct, but my solution could be the second solution, taking the contradictory evidence and incorporating it into one's own theory. So no matter what you do, they're always going to try and just use the facts to their advantage, because this is quite similar to how a conspiracy theorist functions. And I've talked a lot about this on the channel before, but conspiracy theorists use real facts. That just needs to be restated over and over again. Conspiracy theorists use real facts. But what they do is, they have fictitious connections between the facts. Like, there was a Zodiac killer. The Zodiac killer wrote coded messages called ciphers or cryptograms. Oh yeah, but my solution to this cipher with a cryptogram is true. Like, they're just inserting their own observations into the case whenever it is convenient. And this also ties into the concept of accountability. These people who are just always incorporating the contradictions into their own theories, they're putting themselves into the category of blamelessness. They're putting themselves into a category that has no accountability. And the reason why is they can't be proven wrong. They're just always adding in an escape rope or a get out of jail free card, and they're just trying to avoid all forms of accountability for the errors in their research. And at that point, it's just mental gymnastics on their part. Now, there are some people out there that are going to go into the next category. We've talked about the people who don't accept criticism. We've talked about the self-delusional. The third one would be the grifters, the genuine liars, the people who know that their stuff isn't true. They know that they are selling books, or maybe they're trying to get a documentary or a TV show, and they know it's not real. They're simply putting it out there because they don't care. I think it's a little bit similar to the lack of accountability. They can say some type of wild theory, and unless the case is solved by the FBI 100%, they won't have to face the music. They won't have to be accountable for it. So I've talked a lot about the grifters and the scammers out there, and I've gone through them name by name and provided the evidence. You can go through some of the older Zodiac killer news reports, but I think that these are just something that we should always bear in mind. Some people are making it up. Some people are saying things that they do not believe, and they're doing this because they want money. And even if they're not going to earn a lot of money, they want attention. They just want to be interviewed on TV. They're annoying, they're trolls, and so they just want to make the story about them. And I think that ties very easily into the next theory, or the next correspondent, or the component. I said correspondent, but I meant the word component. In these, what Neil Arnold called the cranks, who are proposing weak suspects. Now, I would like to use the example of Deborah Perez, the woman who was accusing her stepfather, Guy Ward Hendrickson, of being the Zodiac killer. Stepfather is maybe not the best term. He was her adoptive father, born in 1915, and he would have been 54 years old at the time of the Zodiac crimes. And she's a person who began to develop a bunch of memories that kind of came out of nowhere. She all of a sudden remembered that her father was the Zodiac killer. And this happens rather frequently. where people begin to recall specific information about the past that they didn't recall immediately. Like, these aren't memories that they've lived with their entire lives. It's like, oh yeah, my dad was the Zodiac, and he drove me to 2 of the crime scenes, and I heard the gunshots. And furthermore, Deborah Perez also states that she wrote the Melvin Belli letter that the Zodiac mailed on December 20th of 1969. That's why the handwriting looks different. That's why there's very neat handprinting on the Melvin Belli letter, and the earlier Zodiac letters in the summer of 1969 are very sloppy. Well, they were written by a female child. Like the Melvin Belli letter was written by a female child in her theory. And you might just be wondering, well, how on earth is she coming up with this? And furthermore, Deborah Perez is also the woman who claimed that she was the illegitimate daughter of John F. Kennedy. And all of these things just sound so wild and so ridiculous and so implausible. But the sad fact is, I agree with the writer M. William Phelps, who said that she's not lying. She actually believes this. And I've not seen a single piece of evidence that would suggest that Deborah Perez is lying. She wanted DNA testing on a pair of glasses to see if it would have been the Zodiac's, or at the very least it would have been Paul Stein. She thought that the Zodiac stole Paul Stein's glasses and took them with him after he murdered Paul Stein on October 11th of 1969. If she's going to go to that level of investigation, well, then she most likely believed it. Otherwise, if it's all a hoax, well, then that would have been setting herself up for failure. But I think what's more interesting and what the question was about is, what is happening? I think that some people become very frustrated in life, and they become very dissatisfied with their life, and then they kind of get lost in a mental wormhole or some type of just a corner of their imagination, and they want to start believing something that isn't true. Oh, well, I turned out to be an ordinary person. And then they start remembering these things about, my dad was the Zodiac killer and I helped him do it. So I think that that's a little bit of boredom and a little bit of frustration. But I think the next person, or not a person, but the next group of people on this list would be the half-truths and the half-liars. And the biggest example of this is Robert Graysmith, author of the 1986 book Zodiac, because Graysmith gets accused of this all the time, splicing together two ideas that don't belong together. I mean, he even has a book out there about Jack the Ripper, saying that Jack the Ripper's this guy from Scotland, and he moved to England and then moved to America and ended up in San Francisco, the Bell Tower. It's all just that. It's taking two ideas that don't belong. Okay, Jack the Ripper's this guy that's living in San Francisco in the late 1800s. I mean, he is using things that maybe, most likely, are not completely true. And this all happened with the Zodiac case. And one point that is strongly reiterated over and over again is that Graysmith had access to the Zodiac killer files. He had access to the case file, and he most likely knew that he was saying things that weren't completely true, but what he was counting on was that the general public would not have access to those files. He was expecting that they wouldn't have the ability to go through them, or that there would ever be a ZodiacKiller.com with numerous pieces of the case file uploaded by Tom Voigt, or something like that, and then ZodiacKillerFacts.com and ZodiacKillerSite.com and all of these other things in the internet age. I mean, 1986 was when the book Zodiac came out. So he didn't really think that people would have fact-checked a lot of his material, and I think that there are going to be a lot of other people who do that both consciously and unconsciously. I think some people genuinely do not tell the entire truth. And I will share something with you guys on a personal note. I was doing my master's thesis about, that would have been 6 years ago. And I was reading a book, and I started writing something down on my notepad because I found a good piece of evidence that supported my thesis statement. This is very beneficial to my argument. But then I read the paragraph again, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've misread this. It actually says something that contradicts my thesis statement and my argument. Instead of saying it is true, it was something like it is not true. That then I thought, well, you know what? I doubt anyone's actually gonna find this exact paragraph. Why don't I just leave it in there because I really like the way that it's structured. And then I was like, wait, no, I can't do that. That's not true. And that's something that I wanted to really be aware of because I don't think everybody has that moment when they say, wait, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah, I get it. It's a better story. Yeah, I get it. It's more entertaining. Yeah, I get it that they think no one's gonna look, so they add in elements to their wild true crime theories just because of that, because they think they're gonna get away with it. And people really expect that they can share lots of true crime theories, and if they're not going to be proven wrong, if they're not going to be examined, they'll say whatever they want. Perhaps one of the last points on this list would be something that I'll introduce in a twisted, long-winded, roundabout way, because I often talk in twisted, long-winded, roundabout sentences. I was actually reading a true crime thread on Facebook about the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, and I encountered a comment that was written by Thomas Henry Horan, author of The Myth of the Zodiac Killer, as well as the segments that are making up that book, The Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986 and 69. And someone presented this wild theory about JonBenet Ramsey, and what Thomas Horan said was, this is not a drunken storytelling contest. That's not true. Something to that effect, but there was definitely that term in there, drunken storytelling contest. And I think that, firstly, some people say Thomas Horan does that with his own works. That's why I was quite surprised. I don't say that personally. But also, I do think that some people are approaching true crime cases in that particular way. They are saying theories or making hypotheses that are just trying to be wild. And I've talked about one of them on the channel before when I did a response to the video I Am Fantastic, or I Feel Fantastic, excuse me. It features this android who uses the name Tara, who was designed by John Bergeron, and she's singing this song called I Feel Fantastic, and somebody wrote out their theory about that, saying, I think that this was created by a serial killer, and that the serial killer is burying his victims underground, but he's burying them alive, and he's recording their screams, and he's using the screams of his victims to make the voice of the singing android. And then people are like, what on earth are you talking about? Like, oh, you're just messing around. And that's what it be it. That would be messing around. And some people are genuinely doing that. They're saying things, again, that they don't actually believe, but they're conflating it with entertainment. Do you see how there's enough material for a book in that? But as far as a drunken storytelling contest goes, if we actually had Henry Horan here, and we were all just, kicking back some cold ones, oh, he'd wipe the floor with all of us. And I mean that as a compliment if it came to a drunken storytelling contest. Horan is up there with the best. Again, purely complimentary. Now, I think that will conclude this segment on the different types of people that might be cranks in the true crime world, promoting theories about that don't always make a lot of sense. But there's a final element of Neil Arnold's comment that I would like to address, and that is the concept of dragging somebody's name through the mud if it turns out that they were not the Zodiac Killer. And I have to give credit to Mark Hewitt, author of Hunted, Profiled, and Exposed, for addressing this, because Mark Hewitt proposed that Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was also the Zodiac Killer, and Mark Hewitt isn't the only person. Douglas Oswell also accused Kaczynski of being the Unabomber, and there were other people like Michael Butterfield who briefly thought that Kaczynski was the Zodiac and the Unabomber, that there's this Zodiac Unabomber connection. But Kaczynski is hardly getting his name dragged through the mud. He is a convicted murderer. He killed people. He was a domestic terrorist. I mean, every sort of nasty thing you could say about Kaczynski is probably true. Another example would be Bruce Davis, Charles Manson's right-hand man, gets accused of being the Zodiac Killer. Convicted murderer, life in prison. Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, also gets accused of being the Zodiac Killer by Ann Penn. Convicted murderer, in prison. These people are already in the mud, so to speak, and if it turns out that any one of those three people or any of the other convicted murderers on the list get accused of this, not all suspects are getting their name dragged through the mud. just wanted to throw that in there. That's almost like some type of wacky condition. But I would like to move on to the next segment here, and this is going to be talking about a video that I watched recently from the channel SBSK. I haven't talked about that one in a while, and it was all on antisocial personality disorder. And I would like to ask you guys the question, and I'll try to answer it myself, but I want to know your responses. Did the Zodiac killer have antisocial personality disorder? And the Zodiac was a serial killer who operated in California in 1968 and 69, but he also made phone calls and wrote letters and created the previously discussed cryptograms. To provide something from NHS.UK, antisocial personality disorder is a particularly challenging type of personality disorder characterized by impulsive, irresponsible, and often criminal behavior. Someone with antisocial personality disorder will typically be manipulative, deceitful, and reckless, and will not care for other people's feelings. And on SBSK, they instantly said that people with antisocial personality disorder are sociopaths and psychopaths, but I don't necessarily think that that is going to be immediately the case, although there is a very strong similarity right there. But the person that was being interviewed said that certainly he was aware that his upbringing and the surroundings around him, the environment in which he grew up in, created the antisocial personality disorder. All of that came from outside influences as opposed to something that he was born with. And he said that it came from growing up in a poor neighborhood, and a very rough neighborhood, and seeing a lot of abuse that was not only happening to his family, but also to the people around him. And he learned that there is a certain deviance about people, or he learned that the extremes of what human beings are capable of, and that there is this very bleak, nihilistic view of the world that, oh, everybody is just trying to manipulate and trying to deceive and trying to destroy. Therefore, it is not something that one should run away from. Instead, it is just about putting on a plain, gentle facade and integrating into the world of other people, but still trying to manipulate them if they ever get the chance. And a characteristic of his behavior was, he said that he worked in customer service, but he spent almost no time with people outside of work. And I think that was also just again, we have to differentiate between antisocial and asocial, but a lot of it is just looking at how people are just these objects that do not have any emotional connection, and trying to manipulate them, trying to get inside the killer's mind for a second. Now, would this have been the Zodiac killer? Well, based on this definition that has been put forward here by NHS.UK, characterized by impulsive, irresponsible, and often criminal behavior, the Zodiac killer definitely does not seem to be a very impulsive killer. I mean, it's possible, but I don't really see that, because the Zodiac is stating very clearly that he is a cold and methodical killer, that he is attacking the victims, he is showing an extreme amount of composure, and a clear example of this is the Stein murder, which I mentioned briefly. On October 11th of 1969, the Zodiac killer murdered Paul Stein in his taxicab, and then he moved Paul Stein's body a little bit. He took Paul Stein's keys, wallet, and a piece of his bloody shirt, and was able to walk away extremely calmly. Those are psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies. However, the fact that he was able to remain composure and be so shockingly calm suggests that maybe he wasn't an impulsive killer, but rather someone who had put a fair amount of planning and had a lot of awareness as opposed to impulsivity. And believe it or not, being impulsive and impulsivity, that is on the Hare checklist, which is used to diagnose psychopathy or sociopathy. Psychopath meaning you're born with it, sociopath meaning that your social surroundings have created it. But a lot of killers are not impulsive. I will repeat that. A lot of killers are not impulsive. They are waiting. They're hiding in the shadows. They try to put on this facade of how they're just a normal person, but then they unleash their destructive tendencies when they think they will not get caught. That is what I think the Zodiac killer is. And this person who was being interviewed by SBSK to talk about antisocial personality disorder, a man who has it, shared something about the way that serial killers are thinking and acting. And to share that with you right now, or at least my interpretation of it is, he said that there's this lack of empathy for other people. And the example used is, have you ever had a conversation with someone where they were talking to you about a subject that you didn't care about, and you didn't really want to keep the conversation going, but you did? You were just listening to somebody talk about something that didn't have a lot of importance to you. That is how someone with antisocial personality disorder would view other people, and perhaps psychopaths and sociopaths, and even certain narcissists as well. And I definitely think that that aspect of the Zodiac would have been rather true. I mean, I definitely think the Zodiac would have tolerated a lot of people whom he didn't personally care about too much. However, I mean, this is all guesswork. We do not know of even if there was one killer, or two killers, or four killers in the Zodiac mystery. But I think that it's important to ask these questions because what type of individual or group of people plan this? I mean, is this coming from someone who has just been traumatized as a kid and that they are trying to unleash their trauma onto other people, projecting their traumatic experiences onto other people? Well, society was terrible to me, so I'm going to be terrible to society. Or is this something that was done because of a twisted art project or some type of twisted novel that has come to life? Or perhaps creating a four-act play? That's why the Zodiac's always talking about the Mikado and Gilbert and Sullivan, not to mention all the other references to literature such as The Most Dangerous Game, perhaps the other clues I've been talking about recently, Charlie Chan at Treasure Island, Sign Z by Edwin Baird, The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. There could be all of these literary references that have been included into the Zodiac's creation. And it's a terrible creation, and that's what we have to remember. The Zodiac murdered people. Yes, there's a problem-solving element that we all enjoy. However, the Zodiac was a killer, and he is an absolute dirtbag for all of the crimes that he did. But I would like to just answer this question. Does the Zodiac Killer have antisocial personality disorder? Irresponsible? Yes. Showing manipulation and deceitful tactics? Yes. Reckless? Not completely, a little bit, but the Zodiac appears to be very much in control. Will not care for other people's feelings? 100%, 110%, 120%. Yes, these serial killers don't care about other people's feelings. They are just pretending to. Or as one person said in a documentary, and I don't even know who it was, or else I'd cite the source. They said that the Zodiac, excuse me, they said that serial killers are people who are extremely low in trait agreeableness. Again, I misstated it the first time. Serial killers are extremely low in trait agreeableness, but they pretend to be agreeable. They have very little empathy. They don't actually care about all the characteristics of an agreeable person. It's just pretend. And I've shared a lot of this in several previous episodes, but I would like to just add an additional element of how the man with antisocial personality disorder on SBSK was talking about how he believed that his environment had created that, or the exposure that he had to the brutality of humanity, the brutal nature of humanity, created antisocial personality disorder within him. And I'm definitely reminded of the serial killer Michael Bruce Ross, who was known as the Eggman, also the Roadside Strangler, and he gets the name the Eggman because he grew up on a chicken farm and he was regularly exposed to the slaughter of animals. And some people insist that watching animals being slaughtered is a component or characteristic of how they are. It's affecting the way that a person thinks, and it shows that killing is something that can be incorporated into their daily life, and that's why many serial killers would then go on to abuse animals, and that gets into something called the McDonald Triad, where serial killers are abusing animals, they set fires, and they are frequent bedwetters. Some people absolutely reject that type of thinking in the McDonald Triad, but I'm always open to possibilities. And the next thing that I would like to do is something that is a little bit outside of the Zodiac killer world, but I would like to talk about a recent arrest that has been made in the Delphi murder case. And I've never made a single episode about the Delphi murders. I do not plan to say that I know everything about it inside and out. A lot of people on YouTube have devoted countless hours to the Delphi murders, but the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because it has been 50 some odd years since the Zodiac killer committed his crime spree. 53 years, right? And the Zodiac crime spree mostly ended on October 11th of 1969. Maybe it went into 1970 and beyond, all the way to the 1980s. We aren't completely sure. However, the Zodiac did not get caught. And an arrest has been made in connection with the Delphi murders. And is this giving us hope that one day we will get answers in the Zodiac case? We've seen a lot of true crime cases solved this year, and some of them aren't even murder cases, such as the disappearance of Brandon Lawson. His remains were located in what was most likely an accidental or drug-related death, and it just took a long time to locate his remains. And we've also seen identifications, such as of the Fire Island John Doe, as well as Horseshoe Harriet was one of the victims of the serial killer Robert Christian Hansen, and the Artesia Jane Doe was identified as Cadence Langley. That was a case that I was talking about recently. With advances in technology, it is possible that we will learn more about the true crime world, and just one day I hope that they're going to be posting something about how the Zodiac killer mystery has been solved, and it's not going to be some hack like Tom Colbert from the Case Breakers saying that Gary Francis Post was the Zodiac killer. No, he was not. Sorry, that would fall into the category of most likely being a for-profit grift. But I would like to read this article from Fox59.com talking about the Delphi murders. Man booked into Carroll County Jail in connection with the Delphi murders not cooperating with the investigation. Update. Police confirmed on Sunday that Richard Allen is not cooperating with their investigation into the murders after being taken into jail. Multiple sources indicate that a man named Richard Allen was booked into the Carroll County Jail Friday in connection with the Delphi murder investigation. Allen, age 50, has been moved to a state facility for his safety, sources said. Earlier, law enforcement sources told Fox 59 that a major development was in the works in the 2017 murders of Libby German and Abby Williams, and a news conference scheduled for Monday with additional details has been planned. The teens disappeared on the Manon High Bridge on February 13th of 2017. They were reported missing and their bodies were found around noon on February 14th of 2017. The high-profile murder case has gone unsolved for more than 5 years, generating mountains of online speculation about the identity of the killer. Police released 2 different sketches of potential suspects. Key evidence included audio and photos from Libby German's phone, with a police audio clip that has been released of a man saying, "Down the hill." Court documents unearthed by the Murder Sheet podcast over the summer showed an FBI agent believed there was probable cause to search the property of Ron Logan, who owned land on where the girls' bodies were found, the authorities said. The search warrant revealed additional details about the investigation, including that the recording, which says "Down the hill," originally lasted for 43 seconds, and only a fraction of it was made available to the general public. Additionally, investigators found large amount of blood at the scene, leading them to believe that the perpetrator would have gotten blood on his or her hands or clothing. The individual may have taken a souvenir from the crime scene, according to court documents, and the bodies may have been moved or staged. According to the warrant, the investigating agent believed Logan's physical build matched that of the man who appeared in the video from Libby's phone. His voice was not consistent with the audio recording that was released to the public. Logan did lie about his alibi, according to investigators. He was never named as a suspect or charged in connection with the Delphi case, and he has since died. The case, which has gained national attention, has picked up momentum recently, and the authorities are revealing a social media profile called Anthony Schatz, who had interacted with Libby. And a lot of you guys in the comment section have shared things with me about the Delphi murder case, even though I haven't done an episode on this, but I do remember you asking me what do I think about this Anthony Schatz, and the honest answer was I did not know, because I wasn't amazingly familiar with all of the details. But sometimes, though, we see breaking news in these true crime cases, and it's not what we're looking for. It's not as beneficial as we hope it will be. Police traced that profile to an individual named Keegan Klein who was being investigated in connection with a child exploitation case. He has never been charged or named as a suspect in connection with the Delphi murders. Klein has been questioned about the case, and his trial on 30 counts of possession of CP, not even going to say those words out loud, is going through the court system. In recent months, Indiana state troopers have been searching the Wabash River in Peru, potentially looking for evidence that has been tied to the case. But I think the more valuable points here are the stuff involving Richard Allen, and some people think that the Delphi murders this case has been cracked, that they found the guy, that he is the bridge guy, and I'm just surprised that the name Allen keeps coming up over and over again. Of course, we have Arthur Lee Allen, the prime suspect in the Zodiac killer mystery, as well as Gregory Allen, the man who actually committed the rape and attempted murder of Penny Bernstein back in the 1980s, which sent Stephen Avery to jail, made famous by making a murderer. And that was the first time that Stephen Avery was sent to jail for an extended period of time when he did his first 18-year sentence. What is going on in the world? And right now I would like to get to your shout-outs from BuyMeACoffee.com. As previously stated, anybody who makes a donation or contribution to help support the show will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. And the first one comes to us from Batman. Yes, it says, Batman bought you a coffee. I never get tired of hearing that. Bruce Wayne, thank you so much for your continued support. And the next shout-out comes to us from Drew Beeson, author of Sighting In on the Zodiac Killer, as well as the host of the Zodcast. And Drew also has material out about the D.B. Cooper case, as well as the disappearance of the Yuba County Five. And last year, I was a guest on Drew Beeson's channel, and he invited me on. We had the opportunity to talk about Killer on a White Horse, as well as, of course, the Zodiac Killer, and even got into the stories of Bigfoot for a while. So I invite you to check out his channel as well, Drew Beeson. And thank you so much to everyone who has left a comment or subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. All of those things really help out BlackBoxOnlineRadio and, of course, BuyMeACoffee.com. And the final thing that I want to share with you, it was something that was sent to me by AB, who sent this into the email address, BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com, and the subject of the email was Moraga Skull, referring to Moraga, California. So I've been doing the regular series about the Moraga letters and a possible Zodiac killer connection to Moraga, California, and in the email there was a YouTube video for a true crime case called Moraga, California, Skull Hanging Unsolved Mystery near St. Mary's College, Contra Costa County Sheriff's, 1937. And this video was made by the channel Spins and Needles. Very well done true crime channel, actually, because the person who is running this one, I believe that his name is Stephen John Powers, as it says at the end of the episode, a Stephen John Powers film. I believe that he is just going through old newspaper articles and he is reading from them and responding to them. But I think it's valuable to talk about true crime cases because we can see intersections between the way that some crimes were committed, say, in 1937, and how about in 1969, like the Zodiac killer. And this is Zodiac related, I guarantee you, because I'll read the description that was written out by Powers. A true crime mystery involving a hanging and a shooting. But what happened first? A most important piece of evidence was missing from the newspaper report of November 12, 1937. The skeletal remains of Henry Bellafield, also known as Dollafield, were found around 4 miles southwest of Moraga, California, home of St. Mary's College in lonely Redwood Canyon. Deputy Sheriffs Raze Stoffels and P.N. Donaldson gathered evidence. The medical examiner in this case, such as was available in those days, was certainly presented with a strange and curious situation. And what happened was that about 100 yards from the highway, a man died, and his skull was found hanging from a tree. Only the skull. They estimated that he had been dead for approximately 20 months before his remains were found, and you might be thinking, well, this could have been a suicide and decomposition, and I should add that the rest of his body, his skeletal remains, even in a jacket, were found below the skull. It's just over 20 months decomposition did take place, so you might be thinking, okay, well, it's a suicide, right? Well, not quite. There was a bullet that was found lodged in the man's skull, but there was no gun found nearby. So how on earth could that have been a suicide? Yes, it does appear that he was hanged, But if there's a bullet in his head and the body wasn't moved for 20 months, what happened to the gun? I mean, did he shoot himself and then the gun just magically disappear? But the reason why JB sent this to me is, could this have been an inspiration for the Zodiac killer? Someone growing up in California, being exposed to true crime cases perhaps in the newspaper, and even if we're not entertaining the exact Moraga letters connection that I've been talking about on the weekends, could someone have been exposed to things like this and seeing crimes that are happened by gun and by rope, and then eventually holding on to those memories to incorporate them into the Zodiac's, stealing of the death wheel. Stealing the death wheel, it says by rope, by knife, by gun, by fire. That wasn't an original Zodiac creation. That was definitely used not only from the Tim Hole comics, which is most famously discussed, but even all throughout literature. It's called, there's a figure called the Lady of Situations who spins a wheel, and that could determine somebody's fate. But you see how different elements are used in a crime. And the creator of this one, Spins and Needles, asks some challenge questions. How could a body be found with the skull hanging from a rope that is still on the tree, and the skeletal remains are found below, undisturbed, yet if this was a death by gunshot, where's the gun? Like, how on earth could this scenario have taken place? And there are some possibilities that are discussed in the episode. It's only about 5 minutes long if anyone would like to watch or listen to it. And of course, I invite you to check out some other things on this channel, Spins and Needles. Like I said, it's well done. But the possibilities. Number one, the man was standing on some type of wooden object that could have been decayed, maybe like on a log, and he put the noose around his neck and then kicked the log out while he was shooting himself in the head. Like, he shot himself in the head while he was trying to hang himself, so he was trying to die in two ways. Guarantee that he would have committed suicide. If the gunshot didn't kill him, then the rope would have killed him, by rope and by gun, excuse me. But then what happened to the gun? Well, perhaps a person walked by and they saw the man hanging from the rope and they saw the gun on the ground and they examined the body and then they thought the guy was dead. But, I mean, 1937 and some place of very rural area that wasn't even properly examined for 20 months. I mean, more than a year and a half after the shooting. So the guy just picked up the gun. Hey, this is a nice pistol. And you might be thinking, was this a robbery? Almost certainly not. Because Henry Bellafield had over $300 in the jacket that was found on the skeletal remains that were below the hanging skull. I mean, if that had been a robbery, that's a pretty poorly done robbery, leaving behind all the money. Not to mention that he also had a bank document that said back in Ohio he had an account with $1,700. That also suggests that it was a suicide. However, I think one theory that was mentioned in the video that I thought was particularly interesting, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's interesting, is the Spins and Needles creator said, what if a hunter had been walking through the woods and he encountered the man hanging from the tree, who again committed death by hanging. It was a suicide, no foul play at all, and he shot him in the head just arbitrarily, not for any real purpose, just because he's alone in this odd stretch of the California woodlands. I mean, you might think about that and like, wait, that doesn't sound super realistic, but at the same time, where's the gun? Where's the gun? I mean, if this guy died from a gunshot, either he used the gun himself and somebody picked it up, or someone shot him with a different gun after he was already dead. And the only third possibility is some way, somehow, the gun was covered massively by the earth and elements, but I wouldn't think that's true if the skeletal remains were left behind. And even like if an animal were to move it some way, normally an animal isn't going to move a gun that far from the from the site where it was used and not disturb the skeletal remains. Those are the things that the animal would go for. But what do you think? If you have anything to share about the death of Henry Bellafield, then you can weigh in. What makes sense to you in that particular scenario? Is there a possibility that you can think of that you find to be much more plausible as opposed to the suicide that was done first by gun and then by rope, and then somebody stole the gun, or that this was a suicide by rope and then somebody shot him arbitrarily? And do you think that the Zodiac killer would have been someone who would have been reading the newspaper growing up, like, say, 1937, for example, reading about these types of true crime cases and incorporated them into the Zodiac persona? That would be a definite Zodiac-related connection to this one. Okay, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram. And I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Goodbye.